Yeah. New Directions in Agrarian Protest. My name is Cynthia Geyer, and I'm the coordinator of the Agriculture Project in Washington, D.C. The focus of the project is to support individuals and organizations and coalitions who are working now across the country in different ways to change farm, land, and food policies at the state and local level. Over the past couple of years through this job, I've had the opportunity to travel to many states across the country and to work with people and organizations who are struggling to regain control over the food system in different ways. As Merle Hansen, or taking off from the words that were so eloquently spoken on tape by Merle this morning, global tensions and increasingly threat of war, the increasing exploitation of our natural resources, and the potential devastation of our planet's delicate life support system by technological developments like nuclear power have placed us undoubtedly in the most vulnerable and unstable time of our history. In terms of agriculture today, corporate interests have now successfully gained a virtual stranglehold over the entire food system from production to distribution. Speculation on land is increasing, and spiraling food prices are causing extreme economic hardships for all Americans, especially for low-income families and people like senior citizens living on fixed incomes. People have not stopped fighting the corporate stranglehold in our agricultural economy and to challenge our government at national, state, and local levels, which has alternately been indifferent to our problems or openly supported big business interests. Family farmers organizing for parity, for equity in farm income. At the same time, farmers fighting power lines, strip mining, water projects on their land, and stopping the increasing exploitation of farmland by the big energy companies in the name of our national interest in achieving energy self-sufficiency. Black landowners in the South, right now, building a county-by-county membership-based organization in an effort to keep their land from slipping into the hands of big timber companies, agribusiness, and real estate speculators. People in the mountains of Appalachia, for the last 20 years, laying their bodies down in front of coal trucks and giant strip mine tractors to stop the rape and devastation of their land. Farm workers organizing unions and boycotts to protect their rights as workers in our fields and as human beings. Low-income families, senior citizens, neighborhood and community groups are building new ways to fight food inflation and to reestablish a more direct link between consumers and farmers again. The panelists, of which there are 7, are all people who represent the thousands of other individuals active around farm, land, and food-related issues today in this country. Everyone has to keep their presentations fairly short, with the exception of our first speaker, who, Fernando Cuevas, from the Farm Labor Organizing Committee in Ohio. Originally, there was supposed to be one full session on farm labor struggles, and because of time limits, that had to be canceled. So Fernando's going to talk for 15 minutes. Everybody else is going to try and keep it to 5. And as Marilyn said, there are a lot of other people that should probably, 30 other people that should be sitting up here with us. And what we want to do then is open up the mics and have people from different parts of the country talk about struggles that they're involved with around the country. Thank you.
First of all, I think I would like to start by letting you know that I am a farm worker myself. I'm still working out there in the fields, like in Ohio. I'm still picking pickles and tomatoes. I still, if like a majority of you probably seen that movie that you've seen about Farm Labor Organizing Committee, I still live on that one-room shanty, but until I went on strike in 1978. I'll sort of take off from, I'll add a little bit on that. When Flock first started, it started about 12 years ago, Farm Labor Organizing Committee. It sprouted right out of the fields itself with a young organizer, 19-year-old by Valdemar Velasquez. and by several farm workers themselves that were organizing in the migrant farm workers. And back in '68, the organization of FLOC organized up to at least 35 different contracts with farmers, negotiated them, had to go on strike, of course, but we won the contracts. We got our demands, what we wanted at the time. But then it was really cutting into the farmer's profit way too much that the farmers started making the decision that it was just as well for him to plant corns, beans, or soybeans. So some of them did that. And on top of that, the cannery took away as many as 11 of those contracts from the farmers and handed them to other new farmers. So our organizing would have to start all over again. So we learned something from those two things. We learned that the farmer really did not have enough to pay what we really need, or to get the housing that we really need, or the working conditions that we need. We learned that the cooperations is the ones that are the power. The cooperations is the ones that's exploiting the farmer and that is exploiting the farm worker. So in 1971, FLOC started organizing itself and the farm workers to get prepared to go at the canneries, the cooperations like Campbell's and Libby's. I'm going to make a big jump. In 1978 is when finally the farm workers got organized strongly enough and got prepared strong enough to make the decision that they were ready to go. By that I mean in June 27, 1978, FLOC sent out invitations to over 400 farmers in the Ohio area to come to a meeting, to over 40 cannery representatives to come to that same meeting, because we had something of very importance to negotiate with them, to let them know what we were prepared for. But out of all them invitations, 16 farmers showed up. We tried very hard to explain to them what we were going to up against, what we were going to demand. They didn't listen to us. Even though it was only 16 farmers, they start arguing with us. They start coming out from different directions instead of listening to our demands, that we were ready to go on strike if we had to, that we were organized, that we had been organizing, that we wanted them to be on our side. We wanted them to go out together with us, because we knew it was the cooperation that it was against us, and we knew that it was the cooperation that was exploiting the farmer too. But they still stayed aside. They just walked out of our meeting. So in August the 20th, all the farm workers in that area made the decision to go on strike. August the 25th, we did walk out on strike, 1978, and we're still out on strike. When we made that decision to go on strike, it was very clearly put to all the farm workers that if we go out on strike, it's not going to be a matter of going out on strike 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It might possibly take 10 years, because we're going on strike against multimillionaire corporations like Campbell's, Libby's, and we're staying out until we win. See, to us, it's not really not anymore just a matter of feeding ourselves, which is what we're used to. We go out in the fields, we work from sun up to sundown just to make sure that we got enough to feed our stomachs and put some clothes in our backs. But now they are killing us. And I mean they're killing us. They're killing us, they're killing our wives, and they're killing our children. Yes, our children too. They still got child labor nowadays. That's why I say our children. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I should be ashamed that my children have to work out in the fields to make me meet ends in the grocery store so we can all eat. My children have to help me. They have to have excuses when they don't go to school 1 day or 2 out of the week so they can participate in making enough money to make a living. So they're still using child labor nowadays, but they keep it away from the public. What I was really aiming at, though, is that they're killing us with pesticides. They're using all kinds of chemicals on that special rock tomato that they're inventing for mechanization, that they say it's coming to take over. But yet mechanization is not fully here. It's us that's out there picking those tomatoes in those poisons right now. And worst of all, see, I found all this out since 1978. Worst of all, what really makes me feel sad, My little babies has been eating those tomatoes. Can you imagine how much poison them babies were really eating down their stomachs? It's terrible. What we're not even let known of those special chemicals that they're using out in the field with the farm workers there. When the struggle was over for 78, what I mean over is the season was over after we left out in the fields at least 30% of the tomatoes that they couldn't harvest because we had an effective strike in 1978. We started planning for 1979. 150 families of us volunteered to come to especially continue on the strike, not to come to work, but come to stand on the picket line again, to join caravans, and we did. But in 1979, in September the 1st, we had to create what they had to create in 1960s, civil disobedience, what they call breaking the law. We had to do the same thing. Because in 1979, what the farmers done on us, they plant between 15 and 20 rows of corn around the tomato field, so we could not see the tomato field from the roads. And then they would hire scabs and put them in the tomato field by not even letting them know that we had a strike there in the state of Ohio. But our President Valdemar Velazquez caught on to that, and he hired an airplane. So we formed our caravan. He was on his airplane, and through the CB he told us exactly where the fields were. And we went in there and got the pickers out. We had to walk in. About 60 of us walked into the field to let the pickers know that we were on strike. Of course, the pickers themselves are migrant farm workers like myself. They understand what they need. They understand what we deserve. They understand that we're out for better justice for the farm workers, to eliminate all that exploitation that they've been exploiting the farm workers for decades. But by doing that, our children went in there with us. Of course, I remember 3 of my children were with me. I told them, you can't go in, we're going to get arrested. This is what they call civil disobedience, they tell me. We're going to get arrested. They say, Daddy, how come you don't tell us, don't go in the tomato field and pick with you? We have to go in too. So, of course, I couldn't deny them that. They went in with me. And the majority of the children went in with us. After the pickers went out, we noticed there was a mechanical harvester there too. We surrounded. We sit in front of it. It had a choice, run over us or stop. Thank the Lord it stopped. And the workers on that also walked out of the field. By that time we sat down. A whole bunch of us. The sheriff came over with about 40, 50 deputies and recruit officers and everything, what have you, to arrest us. We start giving our banners to the children to walk them out of the field, and the first thing the sheriff done was his bullhorn. He say, and the children will be held under custody, they will be put in welfare, and will be put in homes. Of course, our children start crying, hollering, hysterical, and we tell them to run. First thing the sheriff does, though, he tells his deputies to catch them. I'm not saying now that the deputies hurt our children intentionally, but they ran after our children to catch them, and by doing that, they were really hitting them and hurting them. When I seen that, this is my children they're doing that to. Of course, I can't vouch for the reaction of all the other 60, but I got up and ran to help my children. Can you imagine my little 8-year-old boy? They had him by one on each arm and hanging with his feet on the air. So I just went and rescued him, and thank the Lord I'm big enough that I could do it. And I run through that. They had like a picket line of police officers. I run through it and put him on safety. The whole majority of the 60 done the same thing for all their children, because it created a lot of reaction going around there, and we all got through with all our children. When I turned around, they had my 12-year-old daughter with her arm twisted behind her back and her crying. I must have looked very angry and very, very furious, because I hollered at that officer. I said, let her go! And he did, thank to God. When he left her go, she ran, so I just sat down to get arrested again. We got arrested. We got hauled off to jail. Of course, we didn't walk. They had to carry us. 6 guys carried me. I weighed 250. The worstest thing really that happened is what really hurts my heart. Our lawyer, the first lawyer that had enough guts, I'm serious on this, to work for an organization like ours. We are 97% Mexicans in the organization. 97% Mexicans. But our organization says that anybody can belong to it. no matter what color, race, or read. But the thing is that we're 97% is because 97% Mexicans migrate to that state. That's why. But this lawyer hired to us for $4,000 for 6 months, which is real cheap for a lawyer, but he had enough guts to do it. When he went up to tell us that he was going to bail us out, they had us locked up in a recreation area that they call it's a place that's fenced in. The sheriff walked up to him and says, "Kilroy, you're under arrest." Of course, the lawyer says, "You're crazy." And the sheriff just says, "Get him." The sheriff, 4 deputies, and a civilian just beat him up brutally. They just beat him all over, pulled him down by the hair, and knocked him on the ground. Then they fall on him with their knees on his back and on his head, gave him a fractured skull, partial paralysis to the left side of the brain, and partial to his eye, blindness to his eye. I mean, that's the kind of violence we got there for going against the cooperations like Libby's and Campbell's. We're continuing the strike. We're getting prepared for 1980 now, because we're going to continue every year till we win. We're striking the heck out of them 6 weeks to 2 months out of the year, and boycotting the heck out of them 12 months out of the year, with your help too, if you're willing to help us. What we're seeking from them is what we call a 3-way contract. We are seeking from the big corporations like Libby's and Campbell's a 3-way contract, which will be the Campbell's, the farmer, and the farm worker, which would be our organization, Flock. That's what we are seeking, and we will not go back into the fields to work under those poisons or under those conditions or those exploited wages or the terrible one-room channies that they got, unless we get a 3-way contract, because then we know that the cooperation can afford to pay us what we deserve to get paid for our sweat, the conditions that we're supposed to work under, and the housing that we're supposed to live in. We need some plumbing in our housing also. This is the 1980s nowadays. Oh, great. What we're really asking your support, like our boycott committees that we got, we're asking that if the public would join our support committees, or if there's not a support committee in your area, that if they can build a support committee in the behalf of our organization, in the behalf of our struggle. And what we're really aiming at right now in the support committees is at the schools. At the schools, especially, well, like right now the Catholic schools are helping us tremendously. And also the public schools are doing the same thing. They are collecting what they call labels for Campbell's. And Campbell's, of course, gives them products for their school, for like typewriters or recreation area equipment or et cetera, et cetera. Well, what they are really doing is using our own children as salesmen to sell their product, and at the same time exploiting our children, keeping them from going to school. These big corporations, instead of spending money to use their own salesmen, they're using our children to sell their product. So we are asking the schools to please support the struggle for our children also, and discontinue that program of collecting labels until we win this 3-way contract, which we very desperately need. I don't think that's really asking too much, because it's exploiting our children out in the field. It's exploiting our wives. It's exploiting our lives, and it's eliminating our lives. I read an article the other day about, scared myself because I'm already going on 38 years. This article says that the migrant farm worker expectancy of a life or something like that is 49 years old. So that means I ain't got far to go yet. But till then, I'll go out fighting for this strike, and I'll go out fighting for this contract, and we will not quit until we win. And especially if we can get the supports from the unions, from the churches, from organization, from the public. We are seeking all the support we can get. We'll also support anybody we can help. Like, we're very desperate on this strike. We're very desperate to win. We have noticed, like myself, I have noticed, farm workers are getting exploited all over the United States. So I'm very desperate to win this struggle so we can go to other states and continue the same struggle and continue organizing, so we can organize the whole United States like a big belt of united farm workers all over, united against the cooperations. The farmers could also unite with us. We could all fight together against the cooperations that's exploiting the farmer and the farm worker. We're all brothers and sisters in the long run. We should stick together. in solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernando. I just hope corporations, it sounds less like cooperations. I know. Thanks a lot. Al Sachs is going to be the next speaker. He's been working with the Illinois South Project in Heron, Illinois, and the project is now in the process of building a statewide coalition working mostly on family farm equity issues with a focus on land ownership problems.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk at this meeting about coalitions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one that's growing in Illinois. I'll try to keep things short here. Briefly, to give you some of the history of the Illinois Farmland Coalition, I have to tell you where it came out of. It's a program of the Illinois South Project. The project was started in 1974 to work on coal and energy development issues in Illinois, and specifically in southern Illinois, and related energy impacts. In case people don't know, Illinois is the fourth largest coal-producing state in the United States. Most people don't think of Illinois as a coal state. Most people do think of it as an agricultural state. About a quarter of our crop goes out overseas. We have some of the most productive land in the United States. In 1978, we put together a study called Who's Mining a Farm? It was documentation of coal and energy corporations' ownership of land. We went to 35 of the largest coal-producing counties and went through the tax records and documented 380,000 acres, surface acres of land that coal companies own. This is just the tip of the iceberg because we know that they used a lot of different subterfuges like what they call straws to hide ownership. That was fairly startling, but what was more upsetting to us, I think, was the emergence of secondary agriculture subsidiaries set up by the coal and energy corporations. For example, Peabody, in describing its operations, used the slogan, "From black coal to red meat," and it pretty well sums up their intentions. Another example is Riverside Farms. Now, Riverside Farms has about 27,000 acres, and they are an agricultural subsidiary of Ziegler Coal Company, which is a coal subsidiary of Houston Natural Gas. They plan to start, they call this one of the largest soybean farms in Illinois, and it is, and they're going to be moving into irrigated produce crops. One example is if you look at the largest coal-producing county is in Illinois, Perry County, you'll find that coal companies own 20% of that surface land. And I stress surface land because they own a lot more in terms of coal rights. Okay, out of our interest in this corporate ownership from the energy companies, we started to look at some of the questions of farm structure in Illinois and land ownership, land prices, and what was happening to family farmers in regards to that, aside from just in the coal counties. We found that in the last 10 years, land in Illinois has gone up in price about 300%. And land rents in Illinois are the highest in the corn belt. In some areas, we've heard reports of good corn land renting for $165 an acre. Throughout our research, we found increasing influence of non-resident ownership of land. And we said, well, who are some of these buyers? Briefly, they are non-family farm corporations, land trusts, and foreign corporations. The Illinois Farmland Coalition was started in 1979 to address the problems that rural people face in terms of the loss of control of farmland. Last spring, when the coalition was starting out, we had a hunch that many people were concerned about this issue, not just people who were directly involved in agriculture. Over this last year, this hunch proved to be right. We talked to many different groups about the problems of non-resident investors posed to the family farming system. We found a great level of concern among churches, among taxpayers, among people in unions, among community groups, and any other collection of folks we could speak to. Recently I had a chance to speak to a Chamber of Commerce group. They didn't give me an endorsement, but they listened for a while, and that was interesting. The Illinois Farmland Coalition is conducted through a program of education. We do presentations, research, make sure that we have good documentation to back up what we're talking about, and outreach, radio, TV type of interviews. And finally, through legislative action and support of legislation that will keep farmland in the hands of family farmers. Presently, we have 2 pieces of legislation that we've gotten introduced in Springfield, and we have the endorsement and the backing of 7 different groups in Illinois, including the American Ag Movement, the Farmers Union, National Farmers Organization, and District 30 AFSCME. We're looking forward to continuing our fight for legislation, and as well as some direct action land fights, and there was quite a few inspirational ideas that came to me during this meeting. For more information, we have a sign-up list out in the hall. You can put your name on our mailing list, especially if you live in Illinois. We put together a booklet which talks about some of our basic research. We're continuing to do research on the different ownership problems in Illinois, and we have brochures. If any of you veterans of rural protests have any contacts in Illinois, please let me know about them, as I'd like to bring their experience into the coalition. And I guess the final thing I'd like to say is that this panel of people here is just a smattering of current rural activists out there. If people are interested in becoming organizers and working in rural areas, there's lots of opportunity out there.
Next person will be Chuck Hasselbrook from the Center for Rural Affairs based in Nebraska.
Thanks, Cynthia. That's Walt Hill. I think a lot of people forget that sometimes. Pretty easy. My name is Chuck Hasselbrook. The Center for Rural Affairs is a nonprofit organization based in the town of 900, Walt Hill, in northeast Nebraska. We're an advocacy group. Most of our efforts focus on public policy issues and their impact on the structure of agriculture. We publish a lot of reports, put out a regular, I guess a quarterly journal, and sometimes even get to organizing efforts to change public policies. What we're finding in Nebraska, and Nebraska kind of seems to be a leader in some of the trends toward industrialization of agriculture, but we're seeing a very clear trend toward growth in industrialized agriculture, both through corporate farming, I guess, and also a more subtle trend, which is very evident, I guess, all over the Midwest, of just this trend toward fewer and bigger family farms. It's largely motivated by public policies, which is also having an enormous impact on our rural communities and quality of life, and particularly on opportunity in agriculture. Because when you have bigger farms, whether they be family-owned or not, it means you have fewer farms, and you have fewer opportunities for more people to enter agriculture. A couple of things we stress in our work, a couple of points that I think come up over and over. And one thing we think you have to recognize to understand what's happening in agriculture today is that we're living in a planned economy. The free enterprise system went out the door, I guess, sometime long before I was born. And in this planned economy, there's very many conscious public policy decisions. And the trend toward fewer and bigger farms and toward an industrialized agriculture is very much an outgrowth of conscious public policies designed to bring that end about. And another point I want to stress before I go on is that in public policy, many of the things that seem to help small farmers may very well bring about their demise, because the most important factor in agriculture is competitive advantage. So if you pass a law to help small farmers just a little bit, in the process help big farmers a whole lot, those big farmers are going to bid the small farmer out of the land market, and they're going to produce a lot of livestock and drive the livestock or hog or cattle prices down below what the small farmer can afford to produce at. So I think that issue of competitive advantage between big and small is one of the key issues in agriculture today. Much of our research and the remainder of my comments are going to focus on the hog industry because that's so exemplar of structural change in agriculture today. it's rapid. I think in the last 25 years, the number of hog producers in the country has declined by 80%. And USDA assures us that this great trend is going to continue, and we're going to lose 80% again in the next 20 years. This is largely a result of very clear public policies in the areas of credit programs, in the areas of tax law, and in the area of technological research. For example, in tax law, which may have the biggest impact, investors, high-income investors in a corporate hog factory can recover up to 80% of their investment through tax savings. It's impossible for a small farmer to compete against someone who gains that much profit from the tax code. These advantages come through provisions such as investment credit, accelerated depreciation, and the capital gains provisions. And these are all things that most small farmers like because they get a little bit of benefit from them. And it's a perfect example of what we're trying to stress about things that help small farmers a little bit, or appear to help them a little bit, and actually lead to their demise. Because these things are, basically they're subsidies to investment in capital. And small farms aren't near as capital intensive as they are labor intensive. So when you subsidize capital, you're shifting competitive advantage to larger scale capital intensive farms. When you subsidize capital, you're subsidizing more big equipment, and that means less labor, which means in Midwestern agriculture, it means fewer family farmers. Technological research has played a big role. Naturally, the corporations devote an enormous amount of money to technological research. In agriculture, they're constantly trying to develop ways of making newer and bigger technology for bigger farms because that assures more sales. So there's an enormous commitment of corporation dollars, which in effect I would say public dollars, to developing ways of making farms bigger. In theory, you might think our public research should offset that. We have a huge land grant system. We have USDA directly engaged in agriculture research. I don't think it's more clear in any area of research than in hog production that the USDA and the land grant colleges have used public monies to promote large-scale hog production and have very directly contributed to the decline of the family farm and the small farm producer. Another area, the final area I want to mention is credit policies. I can think of about 3 or 4 credit programs, federal credit programs, which are directly contributing to industrialization in agriculture. But for brevity, I'll concentrate on the Small Business Administration. They're brought into agricultural lending. Clearly, the majority of their loans, particularly in hog production, have gone to very large-scale operation, almost exclusively to build hog factories, in many cases corporate hog factories owned by non-farmers. An agency brought into farm lending to finance small farm businesses should not be doing that. I mean, the operations they were financing were within the top fraction of 1% of the nation's hog producers. They could do that because they had to define what a small business is in each sector, and they said any farm that sells less than $1 million worth of products per year is a small farm. That's kind of like calling anyone less than 7 foot tall is short. After considerable public pressure, SBA is reconsidering that. They're going to redefine it, and they're going to say that farms with less than $100,000 gross sales, at least for hog production, are small, and they're going to direct their loans there. Not surprisingly, they're getting a lot of pressure from Congress, particularly the House Small Business Committee, to reverse that. And we're kind of hoping that we can organize some support for the change so that Congress isn't successful in forcing SBA to back off on the reform. I'd like to urge anyone here who might be interested to write the Small Business Administration in Washington or any congressman on small business committees. I think it's particularly relevant in Iowa because I think you see Representatives Bedell, Neil Smith, and Taki are all on the House Small Business Committee. And I think they and SBA should both hear, if you'd like to see, SBA carry through on its reform, which would direct its lending program to small farmers. In summary, I guess my time is way up. I think those are the important, I guess economic democracy and opportunity within agriculture are very important, that we can't just look at how we can bring more income into the farm sector, but we have to look at how it's divided once it gets there. If it all goes to the largest and the most wealthy farmers, it's not going to do anything to improve opportunity in agriculture. It's going to ruin it. it's going to close opportunity in agriculture. And two other things before shutting up. One, I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to receive our regular materials which we publish and get on our mailing list to either write us or catch me before we leave. And the other thing is that the center is going to be operating a program in Iowa which will basically consist of having outreach personnel to kind of help small farmers adapt alternative energy technologies, and also to help small farmers in the process of applying for Farmers Home Limited Resource Loans. And if anyone in Iowa is looking for a job and might be interested in that, they might also write us or come up and talk to me afterward.
The next speaker is Jo Peterson, who lives on her family's farm in Iowa and has recently gotten involved with a group called Farmers Against Rural Mismanagement. She's going to tell us about why.
I'm hearing everybody say that you know, you can get our newsletter, and if you want a job, we're all farmers and community members, no pay, no newsletter, no money, but we're mad. We're a grassroots organization made up of interested citizens and farmers, like I said, who are directly or indirectly affected by the proposed building of a 400 to 1,200 megawatt coal-fired generating plant in Mondayman, Iowa. It's closer to Modale, and this is all a farming community, and is planned to be built on the river. It was United Farm Limited. We had to change the name because of incorporation. There was another group called Farm, but we still keep Farmers Against Rural Mismanagement, so if I refer to Farm, they're both the same thing. These landowners were concerned about the loss of their land to this coal-fired plant. These people had been contacted by the people that were proposing to build this plant and had been, I should say, pseudo-threatened about having their land condemned by eminent domain. These people had no idea about the law, and they had no idea about eminent domain, and they were very frightened. Allied has approximately 90% of the land purchased that they need for this plant, or they say they need. It's 2,000 acres of land has been bought. Allied, at this time, even though they've bought this land at inflated prices, Allied has not obtained their license, and they have not finished their EIS, even though we have gone through the Environmental Impact Statement scoping meeting with the REA. In spite of the obstacles, we have made some waves, and we met with Representative Tom Harkin, who pledged to help in exercising our legal and constitutional rights. Doesn't mean that he'll bail us out, but he said he'd be behind us if we needed him. And we've talked to Governor Ray and ICC Chairman Varley. Our group has grown in size from 10 to 250. We've obtained a lawyer and have become incorporated. It's an uphill battle, but we're going to see it through. The burning of coal for electrical generation affects us all, and even especially more now because Carter is pushing coal as the answer to bail himself out of the energy crisis. Besides the acreage taken out of production for the plant, railroad spur and transmission lines, more and more acreage is taken out of production for strip mining. Iowa mines are expected to turn out 600,000 to 700,000 tons of coal as compared to 400,000 tons last year. This is high sulfur, high erosion coal. I'd never seen a gasification commercial, coal gasification, until I came here 3 or 4 days ago. And I was just astounded because they're spending our money to push coal. And there are utilities. Why are we selling commercials to us? Why are we selling ourselves in a sense? That really bothered me. Well, anyway. The Soil Conservation Service says these sites will never be an Iowa cornfield again. It's estimated that 3 million acres of land per year are taken out of farmland production. This is the equivalent of 320 acres an hour. Taking our land out of production has many grave consequences. A report by the National Agricultural Land Study projects for the year 2000, if land losses continue, that all food produced in the United States will be consumed here. Consumer food prices will be pushed sharply upward. Food exports will be no longer available to offset massive trade deficits. The hungry nations of the world will be left on their own. This is pretty frightening since the United States supplies 60% of all the world food aid. With this land gone, even more energy will be needed. As farms go out of production, produce must be brought in from even longer distances. Right now, it takes 3 times more energy to move the produce off the farm than it takes to farm it, to produce the food on the farm. Tougher land use programs are needed statewide, and our most valuable resource needs protection. Another of our concerns is the environmental hazards of this plant and plants like it. And I've got about 2.5 hours here about the environmental impacts of coal, but I'll try to summarize it quickly. The first is the greenhouse effect. As most people know what the greenhouse effect is, where the carbon dioxide produced by the coal, the burning of the fossil fuels, increases the temperature on the earth, thus causing major climate changes. And another one is called acid rain, and that's the emittance from the coal stacks that combine in the air. They form weak sulfuric and nitric acid. Each day, tons of this acid rain fall into the earth by a single large coal-fired plant. Scientists say destruction of animal and plant life is inevitable in eastern North America as soon as 10 years, unless the amount of coal burned is reduced immediately. Already, acid rain has killed fish life in 96 lakes in New York State. And the tall smokestack designed to cut down on the pollution only worsened the problem by spreading it around. So in effect, you're messing up somebody else's, you're throwing your garbage over the back fence to somebody else. Environmental standards are being lowered. Rules raising the allowable levels of sulfur dioxide emissions from 10 utility plants in Iowa could be in effect by May. In a meeting with Representative Harkin, he said there's no way this can happen. This was like a year ago. He said, no way, these plants aren't strong enough to do that, but I guess they are. The last of the environmental issues I want to address is that of electromagnetic radiation. And the United States has no standards set. It was just a general guideline set in 1966 of like 1/100th of a centimeter per square inch of exposed flesh. The Soviet criterion is 1,000 times tougher than that for its workers and 10,000 times tougher for its civilians. There have been private studies in the United States that support the Soviet findings. Oregon's legislature is even considering making it electromagnetic pollution a crime. There's been a farmer from Rudolph, Wisconsin wrote a short paper on the effects of these lines on cattle reproduction and concluded that it caused abortion, sterility, and weak and crippled calves. The use of electromagnetic energy continues to expand in the United States. Utility companies are developing 1 million volt lines. That's double the voltage of what we use right now. We need alternatives. From the Comptroller General's report to the Congress in 1979, I quote, "The GAO's analysis demonstrated that an aggressive conservation program provides greater benefits in terms of risk, equity, and environmental impact. These benefits could be obtained at a lower cost to the consumer than under the present coal and nuclear policies, without substantial change in current policies at the local, state, federal, and utility levels, and require little change in lifestyle for the general public," unquote. Solid economic analysis include breaking down our grains into fuels at the point of production would appreciably increase the value of feed grain, and also allow farm states to fill their own priority fuel needs without having to rely on political allocations. Solar, wind, geothermal, and other alternatives and conservation methods need to be actively implemented. The low-interest loans that are available to the utilities must become freer to the private citizen. Education of these at all levels is a must. The last issue, which is the most important, and it's about a paragraph here, is the decentralization of power. It's interesting to note that the coal fields are primarily owned by huge monopolies. I like that you brought that out. But in a 760-page report, the Environmental Policy Institute stated that the more than 1,000 RECs are using their collective political muscle to avoid energy conservation and renewable energy options, obstruct participation of cooperative members in co-op affairs, and abuse agricultural landowners in acquiring land for power facilities. A survey done by Farmland News states that the majority of the people interviewed favored conservation. Allied Power Cooperative has not been able to prove a need for this plant. Obviously, the people who are paying for it neither want it nor need it. It does become quite apparent that the rural electric cooperatives no longer reflect farm interests the way they once did. The RECs need to reevaluate their policies as to better serve the people they supposedly represent. The Iowa state motto is, "Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain." United Farm Limited believes we have the right to be informed about how our resources are spent and the liberty to choose. Thank you.
Next speaker is also a farmer from Iowa. His name is Jim Woodvine.
Well, I've been here this afternoon and I've heard many speakers, all which have given their opinions. Now, I want to give my opinion, and there's one conclusion that I think that we have all come to, that we're being managed by corporations, indirectly, directly, some way, and what I am for is scaling down, putting the farm back to the farmer himself. Go out and drive around and see how many people live per square mile in Iowa in the rural area. There used to be maybe as high as 4 or 5 people and their families living in 1 square mile. At the present time in our area, we have less than 4 people living per square mile, and most of those are widows or widowers, retired people that have nothing to do with their farm except bring the income in. The average size farmer in our area, which is southwest of here about 70 miles, is 1,000 acres. Okay, and this is, I just wanted to throw that in. I've got a prepared speech that I'm going to try to read. Friends, the farmers of this country are broke. We are on a course of financial disaster that delivers the small and large farmer into the hands of the banks and other financial institutions that have not kept us safe from ourselves. Proper management and alternative sources of agri-farming can save us by taking a lesson from our grandfathers. This means we will have to abandon our money ways and go back to working and thinking for ourselves. This means work. Let's hope we have not forgotten how. I'm a small Iowa farmer trying to make ends meet. We have 3 sons, and I hope there will be a future on the farm when they get older. Most of the farmers in our area are broke. They don't realize it, but they're broke. Come next spring, the financial situation they're in right now, there will be 20% less farmers. The backbone of the United States is going to be broken. Those farmers are going to be replaced by people in corporations. And I mean guys with their feet setting up in offices on the 23rd floor. A man right there is an example. He's out there breaking his butt trying to make a living. The guy that's reaping the values of that man's sweat is sitting on his butt. Okay, there's one way that I'm going to help myself. I'm not saying this because I want to make it stick on myself or anything else, but I've been branded a radical for the simple fact that I've been trying to help the small farmers stay on the farm. And there's one way of doing it. This might not be the right way, but at the present time, it's the way that I'm going to do it. Back in '73, I seen the writing on the wall. I'm in the oil business. We have a service station. In the heyday of our operation, we was selling 250,000 gallons of gas a year. Since I've come out and said that I believe the small farmer is getting the dirty end of the stick, and I'm professing alcohol instead of gasohol as an alternative energy because that's a taxable dollar we're dealing with. Alcohol is not taxed at the present time. I have been cut back on my allocations at the station. I've run into financial problems. I'm going to have to refinance one of these days. And there's only one way I could refinance, and that was incorporate myself. I'm a corporation now, folks. I don't like to stand here and tell you that, but I'm a corporation. I was forced to do that for one simple reason. To get any money, the Iowa state law reads that I cannot refinance myself unless I want to go in at 18% interest. That was of yesterday. It's hard to tell what it'll be tomorrow. I've got money borrowed at 6%, 10%, and 12%. If I want to renew any money to stay in business, I'm going to have to incorporate, they said, go into a business venture of some sort where it's feasible to do this. So folks, I'm going to stay in business by borrowing 18% money and becoming a corporation. Totally against my will. But what I am doing is I'm standing here right today and telling you that I'm out to help the small farmer. And I'm making and producing alcohol on my farm for use in our tractors and cars. This is my 2nd year. We started out about a year ago because we wanted alternative fuel and not having to wait for it to be delivered to us. I don't like being controlled by anyone else, especially large corporations. We've had great success producing alcohol in what I call a moonshine still. I got my information by reading books and also talking to people. Making alcohol is nothing new. They have been doing it for years. Brazil has almost totally switched over to alcohol. General Motors is in Brazil right now producing cars that run on alcohol, but yet the bureaucracy in this country and the state we are right now, there's no way that they will put out an alcohol car right now to be sold in this country. Alcohol is, I will state this, 99% pollution free. We would be losing jobs if we turned out a pollution free car right now. And there's one way that I've been doing this. I didn't put a lot of money in this to get started. I have 4 stills right at the present time, and I've got $87.20 in it. Thank you. I do things a little backwards. I don't go uptown and I don't buy a lot of new equipment. I go out and I scavenge the countryside for leftovers. Stuff that people's throwing away, okay? This is the way you do anything anymore because you can't afford to go and buy anything brand new. I predict by the end of this summer, you're going to be in a barter system for the simple reason, when you look at your paycheck, it's going to go to the utility companies. It's already, half of it went to the taxation of this country. And this is the part that I have been put down for the last 3 months. I can make and produce alcohol on my farm by just extracting the starch, same as multi-million-dollar company does, Archer Daniels Midland. Okay? I've still got my protein left. What I'm saying is I can make alcohol for 25 cents a gallon. Archer Daniels Midland, they can do the same thing, but they won't tell you that. It is work to get alcohol, but we have got to stick to being pioneers instead of supermarket addicts. We all know that what happened if the pioneers have never ventured out west. They had guts to try something new, so where are ours? Okay, I won't go through any. There's other people wanting to speak also. Okay. What I want to do is don't confuse alcohol with gasohol. Gasohol is mixed with 200 proof alcohol. You gotta take gasoline and mix with gasohol. But you don't need any of that taxable gasoline to put farmer grade alcohol through your automobiles. At some time or another, if we don't get enough people out there trying alternative resource energy ideas like alcohol, they're going to take it away from us. That's the reason I have taken and I have helped hundreds of people get a license from the government. The government is very cooperative in giving you a license, but I'll be damned if I've seen one piece of information telling you how to put a still together or make the beer to get your alcohol. I take and I've helped thousands of people. I called Chicago one day and I said, how's the licensing going on? Oh, we're totally swamped. They said, somebody must be helping them. And that's all there was to it. And that answered my question. And I'll get off right now, but there's one thing we can do, and that's help ourselves. If we don't help ourselves, somebody's going to think for us, and somebody's going to tell us what to do. And this is where the farmers, the individuals in town, had all better band together, because if you don't, you're going to be totally confused. And when you're totally confused, somebody else rules your mind. Thank you.
I feel like I'm repeating myself. The next speaker is also a farmer from Iowa, and his name is Jim Line.
Been told that we need to cut it down a little bit, so I was prepared for about 12 minutes. So if it sounds a little disgruntled, I've done some editing to try to keep it down to the 5-minute level here. On the program, my name is spelled L-I-E-N. The correct spelling of it is L-E-I-N. There is the name Line that is spelled L-I-E-N. I pronounce mine Leon. I am James Leon, Northeast Iowa farmer who has served as an executive director of a 3-state citizens organization for the past 3 years. The organization is known as RCO. The letters stand for the beginning purpose of the group, that of rerouting a proposal of an oil refinery to place a crude oil pipeline across the finest freshwater aquifer and the most productive agricultural land in the world. The Northern Pipeline Company of Koch Industries sought to place this line at a diagonal across hundreds of farms and at the expense of essential underground tile drainage systems which have been installed. The Reroute Crude Oil Association, or RCO, examined this proposal, studied and researched facts surrounding the Midwest crude oil supply, and testified and upheld these facts so that the needs and interests of all the public may be served. In the accomplishment of the RCO purpose, related goals included the analyzation of existing petroleum transportation modes, of new transportation proposals, and the possible reroutes or alternatives. Cognizant of the national concern regarding the protection of our important resources of land, water, and energy, the group sought ideas and information for the most energy-saving methods of transporting petroleum products which would cause the least impact on the economy, the citizens, the environment, and other factors. Statements made by pipeline company representatives revealed elementary knowledge regarding environmental study, underground drainage systems, and the underground water supply of the Midwest. This display of lack of homework to landowners and their observation of pipeline construction provided a catalyst for the people to band together in a common goal. There is an old adage that there is strength in numbers. However, historically, organizing those numbers hasn't been a common practice. As the organization of RCO progressed, it became more evident that the individual is helpless in efforts against proposals that are set forth to be in the public need and public interest. The financial and political pressure of such proponents far outweigh that of the individual landowner, and they are therefore able to influence decision makers. State and federal agency heads are often not aware of landowner problems or are too bogged down to bring them up to the front. Or it may be a case of being paid off to stay quiet. Energy projects are not, for the most part, based on the impact they will have on natural resources. The ceremony of the land printed on the symposium program reads, "We covet no man's freedom, no man's fields, no man's houses or barns." As I have served the past 3 years to protect the freedom, fields, houses, and barns of thousands of landowners in Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota, I have become to know and experience that ruthless pipeline company covets man's freedom, covets man's fields and his house and his barn. They will take by the power of eminent domain or condemnation man's freedom. They will cut his field to whatever angle they choose. The landowner cannot as much as suggest the location of a pipeline through his property. His fields can be soaked with oil and the productivity destroyed. And yes, they do go so far as to covet the house and the barn. Consider the explosion and the death which occurred last year near Fort Madison and the loss of water supply from a crude oil spill into an aquifer. The house and the barn could well be deserted if the water supply is gone. Pipelines are a long-term facility. Their placement should be required to honor the welfare of those with whom the pipeline benefactors must directly associate, the landowner. The establishment of a facility to fulfill one of the society's needs, namely energy, should not jeopardize another enterprise of our society which also fulfills a very vital need, namely food. What other segment of society can disrupt the operation of the farm business, as I briefly described, takes place during pipeline construction, leave behind hours and years of problems and costs for which the landowners are not reimbursed, and then use another's property perpetually without compensation? Thank you.
The last person to talk before we turn it over to everyone else is Robin Rosenbluth, who's the co-coordinator of an organization that's just been built over the last year called the National Family Farm Coalition, which is trying to build a national coalition between labor, farmer, consumer, church groups around a very progressive and comprehensive bill that's been introduced to Congress.
Hi. Let me tell you a little bit more about the National Family Farm Coalition because I want everybody to know about it. We're working to build a concerted national effort with individuals and organizations around the country and lobbying in Washington, D.C. for the Family Farm Development Act. The Family Farm Development Act, we're working not only on the Family Farm Development Act, but also on other pieces of legislation as well when they come up, because it's important for us to deal with all of the pieces of legislation that are working in Washington. Excuse me, okay, I got a little nervous here. Anyway, to work on federal agricultural policies that represent the needs of small and moderate-sized family farmers and the needs of working class people. Our efforts reach out to farmers, farm workers, environmentalists, church organizations, rural and urban groups,